You know, that moment when you're standing in front of the mirror, adjusting a costume that feels both foreign and familiar. That was me on Halloween night, tugging at the golden corset of my Wonder Woman outfit, wondering if I was channeling the warrior on my chest or hiding the woman beneath it. The divorce papers had been finalized 3 months earlier. 3 months since David's lawyer had smirked across that sterile conference room, while mine shuffled through settlement documents. 3 months since I'd heard him tell his buddies at the country club that I was cold as a corporate contract and cared more about billable hours than bedroom hours. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had become the ice queen he claimed I was. But that night, standing in my downtown apartment with the city lights bleeding through floor-to-ceiling windows, I wasn't thinking about David or his accusations. I was thinking about the bottle of champagne I'd bought to celebrate my freedom, the one still sitting unopened in my kitchen. I was thinking about how my heels clicked too loudly on marble floors, how my laugh had started sounding rehearsed, like a performance. I'd been giving for so long I'd forgotten the real thing. I was thinking about how I'd become a stranger to myself, wrapped in Armani suits and professional smiles that never quite reached my eyes. The invitation had come through my firm's managing partner, some tech mogul's Halloween party on a penthouse. Rooftop, network, he'd said. Mingle, show them Sinclair and Associates isn't just about mergers and acquisitions. So there I was, painted and primped, ready to play the part of the successful divorce attorney who had it all together. But as I stood there, adjusting my tiara one last time, I realized I wasn't sure who I was pretending to be anymore. The penthouse was everything you'd expect from a tech billionaire's playground. Marble floors that reflected the city lights. Modern art that probably cost more than most people's homes. And a crowd of Silicon Valley elite dressed as everything from superheroes to historical figures. I nursed a whiskey sour and made small talk about market trends and patent law, falling into the familiar rhythm of professional networking. That's when I saw her. She was standing by the railing, silhouetted against the glittering cityscape, dressed as a vampire, but not the cheesy Halloween store kind. This was sleek, modern, dangerous. A perfectly tailored black blazer that hugged her curves, blood-red lipstick that made her smile look like a weapon, and dark hair that caught the light like silk. She was talking to a group of men in expensive suits, but her eyes were scanning the crowd like a predator choosing her prey. And then those eyes locked on mine. The crowd seemed to part as she walked toward me, her movements fluid and confident. Every step was deliberate, purposeful, like she was used to commanding attention without asking for it. When she reached me, she didn't bother with the usual pleasantries. Wonder Woman, she said, her voice low and amused. I'd say you're overdressed for this crowd, but I'm not complaining. My breath caught. Up close, she was even more striking, sharp cheekbones, skin like porcelain, and eyes that seemed to see right through the costume to the woman underneath. There was something magnetic about her, something that made my pulse quicken in a way I hadn't felt in years. And you are? I managed, proud that my voice sounded steadier than I felt. Valerie Carter, she said, extending a hand that was soft but firm. I run a cybersecurity firm downtown. And you're Sienna Sinclair, the lawyer who made headlines for taking down that pharmaceutical giant last year. I was surprised she knew who I was. You follow corporate law? I follow power, she said simply, and you, counselor, wield it beautifully. 2 hours. That's how long we talked, standing first by the bar, then finding a quieter corner where the music wasn't quite so loud. She told me about her startup, about how she'd left a comfortable position at a major firm to build something of her own. I found myself telling her about my divorce, about the suffocating feeling of being married to someone who saw me as an accessory rather than a partner. He called me cold, I heard myself saying, surprised by my own honesty. Sighed I cared more. about contracts than connection. Valerie's laugh was rich and genuine, nothing like the polite chuckles I'd grown accustomed to. Maybe you just needed someone who understood that intelligence is the ultimate aphrodisiac. She was sharp, asking questions that made me think, challenging my assumptions about business and life. When she laughed, it wasn't the careful, measured sound I'd perfected. It was real, uninhibited, the kind that made my ribs ache with something I hadn't felt in years. Something that felt dangerously close to desire. The alcohol helped, but it wasn't just the whiskey making my head spin. It was the way she leaned closer when she spoke, the way her fingers brushed mine when she reached for her drink, the way she looked at me like I was a puzzle she was eager to solve. "You know what I think?" she said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I think you've been playing it safe for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to take a real risk." "Maybe," I admitted, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Maybe," she repeated, her eyes never leaving mine. "Or maybe you're just waiting for the right reason to be brave." The party swirled around us, but I felt like we were in our own bubble, insulated from the noise and chaos. When she suggested we get some air on the terrace, I followed without hesitation. The cool October wind cut through the warmth of the whiskey, but it didn't touch the heat building between us. "I should probably head home," I said, not meaning it at all. "Should you?" she asked, stepping closer. "Or should you stop doing what you think you're supposed to do and start doing what you want to do?" My back was against the railing now, the city lights blurring below us. She was so close I could smell her perfume, something dark and intoxicating that made my head spin. "I don't know what I want," I whispered. "Liar," she said softly, her hand coming up to cup my cheek. "You know exactly what you want. You're just scared to admit it." She was right. I was scared. Scared of the way my body responded to her touch. Scared of the thoughts that had been creeping into my mind all evening. Scared of what it meant that I was more attracted to this woman I'd just met than I'd ever been to my ex-husband. "Let's get out of here," she said, her thumb tracing my lower lip. "My place is 10 minutes away." I should have said no. Should have made an excuse about early morning meetings and professional boundaries. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Okay." Her penthouse was a study in contrast modern furniture against exposed brick, cutting-edge technology alongside vintage art pieces. But I barely had time to take it in before she was kissing me, her mouth soft and demanding against mine. My back met the cool glass of the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights casting us in a golden glow. I started to say, but she silenced me with another kiss. "I know," she murmured against my lips. "But you want to." It wasn't a question. She knew somehow that this was new territory for me, that I was venturing into uncharted waters. But instead of making me feel inexperienced or uncertain, her confidence was intoxicating. Her hands seemed to know exactly where to touch, how to make me gasp and arch against her. "You're so much more than what he made you believe," she whispered against my throat, and something inside me shattered. I'd spent so many years being told what I was cool, calculating, more machine than woman. But under Valerie's touch, I felt alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. She took her time, mapping every inch of my body like she was memorizing it, whispering words of praise that made me feel beautiful, desired, powerful. When I finally fell apart in her arms, crying out her name, I realized I'd been holding my breath for years. This was what I'd been missing. Not just the physical release, but the feeling of being truly seen, truly wanted, truly cherished. Afterward, we lay tangled in her sheets, my head on her chest, listening to the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. The city hummed below us, but inside her bedroom, everything was quiet and perfect. "So," she said, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on my back, "how do you feel about breaking your own rules?" I lifted my head to look at her, taking in the satisfied smile on her lips, the way her hair fell across the pillow. Terrifying, I admitted, and completely addictive. She laughed, pulling me up for another kiss. Good, because I'm not done with you yet, counselor. Morning came with a hangover and a phone call. I was in Valerie's kitchen, wearing one of her shirts and trying to figure out her high-tech coffee machine when her phone rang. The conversation was brief, but I could tell from her tone that it was serious. That was my lawyer, she said after hanging up. We have a problem. The problem, it turned out, was a lawsuit. A former employee was claiming that Valara's company had stolen proprietary technology from a rival firm. The accusations were serious corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, fraud. The kind of charges that could destroy a business and a reputation. I need representation, she said, her earlier confidence replaced by something that looked suspiciously like vulnerability. Someone who specializes in corporate defense. Someone I can trust. I should have referred her to someone else. Should have recognized the conflict of interest before it became a problem. Instead, I found myself saying, I'll take the case. It wasn't until I was reviewing the initial complaint that I saw the name of the plaintiff's attorney. David Sinclair, Esquire, my ex-husband. This is a problem, I told Valerie when she came to my office the next day. David's representing the other side. Is that going to be an issue? She asked, though something in her eyes suggested she already knew the answer. It could be, I admitted. He's going to try to make this personal. Use our ... relationship. Against us? Our relationship? She repeated, raising an eyebrow. Is that what we're calling it? I felt heat rise in my cheeks. We hadn't defined what was happening between us, but it was definitely more than just a one-night stand. In the week since the party, we'd seen each other 3 times. Dinner that turned into hours of conversation. A supposed strategy session that ended with her desk being put to creative use. Late-night phone calls that had nothing to do with legal matters. Whatever this is, I said carefully, David's going to use it against us. He'll paint it as a conflict of interest, suggest that I can't represent you objectively. Can you? She asked, her voice serious. Represent me objectively? It was a fair question. Every time she walked into my office, every time she smiled at me across the conference table, I felt my professional composure slipping. But I also knew she was innocent. I'd spent enough time reviewing the evidence to know that the accusations were baseless. A desperate attempt by a failing company to damage a successful competitor. Yes, I said firmly. I can. The legal battle was brutal. David fought dirty, as I'd expected he would. He filed motion after motion, each one designed to drag out the proceedings and drain Valerie's resources. He leaked selective information to the press, painting her as a corporate villain who would stop at nothing to get ahead. The worst part was the way he tried to use our relationship against us. He couldn't prove anything. We'd been careful to keep our personal and professional lives separate, but he didn't need proof. He just needed to plant seeds of doubt. Lesbian affair, oh, corporate espionage? Read one particularly vicious headline. Divorce attorney's intimate business relationship raises questions. I'm sorry, Valerie said when the story broke. We were in my office, the newspaper spread across my desk between us. I never wanted this to affect your reputation. My reputation can handle it, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. The question is whether you can handle the scrutiny. She was quiet for a long moment, studying the headline. Are you having second thoughts? She asked finally. About the case or about us? I wanted to lie, to tell her I was fine with everything. But the truth was, I was terrified. Terrified of what this case was doing to my career. Terrified of what the media attention might bring. Terrified of how deeply I was falling for a woman I'd known for less than a month. I think about it, I admitted. The smart thing would be to walk away, refer you to someone else, keep things professional. But, she prompted. But I've spent my whole life doing the smart thing, I said, playing it safe, following the rules. And where has it gotten me? A loveless marriage, a sterile life, a reputation as an ice queen. She stood up, walking around the desk to where I was sitting. And now I have you looking at me like I'm worth burning the world for, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And I'm not sure I'm brave enough to walk away from that. She kissed me then, soft and sweet, her hands cradling my face. Then don't, she said simply. Don't walk away. So I didn't. I fought for her, for us, for the truth. I worked 18-hour days, building our defense, preparing for trial. And when I wasn't working, I was with her, stewing moments of happiness. Between strategy sessions and depositions, the want was worse than the legal battle. Every brush of her fingers against mine in the elevator, every whispered counselor that sounded like a prayer, every kiss stolen in empty conference rooms, it all added up to something that felt both dangerous and inevitable. The trial lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of testimony, cross-examinations, and legal maneuvering. David was good, I had to give him that. He presented his case with the kind of polished confidence I'd once found attractive. But he was also arrogant, so sure of his superiority that he underestimated both me and the evidence. The turning point came when I cross-examined his key witness, the former employee who'd made the initial accusations. Under pressure, his story began to fall apart. Inconsistencies emerged, timelines didn't match, and it became clear that he'd been financially motivated to make the accusations. No further questions, I said, and I could see David's face fall as he realized his case was crumbling. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned with a verdict of not guilty on all charges, I felt a rush of triumph that had nothing to do with winning and everything to do with justice being served. We did it, Valerie said, pulling me into a hug right there in the courtroom. We actually did it. I hugged her back, not caring who was watching or what the cameras might capture. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The year that followed was a revelation. With the legal battle behind us, Valerie's company thrived. She landed several major contracts, expanded her team, and established herself as one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs. As for me, I discovered that taking on a high-profile case with a controversial client had actually enhanced my reputation rather than damaged it. Other companies began seeking me out, wanting. The lawyer who'd taken on her ex-husband and won. But more than that, I discovered what it meant to be truly happy. What it meant to wake up next to someone who saw me as more than a collection of professional achievements. What it meant to laugh until my sides hurt, to have conversations that lasted until dawn, to feel desire that wasn't scheduled around court dates and board meetings. Valerie and I moved in together 6 months after the trial ended. Her penthouse became our penthouse. Her life became our life. We worked together, building a consulting firm that combined her technical expertise with my legal knowledge. Carter Sinclair. Strategic Solutions, we called it, and it was everything I'd never known I wanted. October came around again, and with it, another Halloween party. This time, we were hosting it ourselves in our shared space, surrounded by friends and colleagues and the life we'd built together. Remember our first night? Valerie asked as we got ready. She was wearing the same vampire costume, and I was back in my Wonder Woman outfit, though this time it felt less like a costume and more like a declaration. You mean when you undressed me like a very impatient CEO? I replied, grinning at the memory. I prefer to think of it as efficient, she said, wrapping her arms around me from behind. Very, very efficient. The party was in full swing when she pulled me aside, leading me to the terrace where we'd shared our first kiss. The city sparkled below us, but she only had eyes for me. Sienna, she said, and something in her voice made my heart skip. This year has been ... incredible. You've been incredible. Valerie, let me finish, she said, and then, to my complete shock, she dropped to one knee. I know we haven't talked about this. I know it's fast. But I also know that life is short, and when you find someone who makes you feel like you can conquer the world, you don't let them go. She pulled out a ring not huge or flashy, but elegant and perfect. A single diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the light like stars. Stay with me, she said, her voice trembling, in every way. Be my wife, my partner, my everything. Marry me, Sienna. I stared at her, this incredible woman who turned my world upside down and inside out, who'd shown me what it meant to be truly alive. A year ago, I would have said it was too fast, too risky, too uncertain. A year ago, I would have asked for time to think about it, to weigh the pros and cons, to analyze the decision from every angle. Instead, I pulled her to her feet and kissed her, hard and desperate, and full of every emotion I couldn't find words for. Yes, I said against her lips. Yes, yes, yes. She slipped the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been made for me. Like everything in my life had been leading to this moment, this woman, this choice. I love you, I said, the words feeling both foreign and familiar on my tongue. I love you so much it scares me. Good, she said, spinning me around until I was dizzy with laughter. Because I love you too, counselor. More than I ever thought possible. The party continued around us, but we were lost in our own world, planning a future that felt as bright and limitless as the city lights below us. 2 years later, I stood in front of the mirror again, adjusting my wedding dress, a simple, elegant sheath that Valerie had insisted brought out my eyes. The woman looking back at me was almost unrecognizable from the one who'd struggled with her Wonder Woman costume that Halloween night. This woman looked happy, confident, alive. Ready? Valerie asked from the doorway, stunning in a tailored suit that made her look like she could run the world. Which, knowing her, she probably could. Ready, I said, taking her hand. We walked down the aisle together because that's how we did everything now together, as equals, as partners in every sense of the word. The ceremony was small, just close friends and family, but it felt perfect. When we exchanged rings, when we promised to love and honor each other, when we kissed as wives for the first time, I felt like I was finally completely myself. The reception was held at our consulting firm's new offices, the Carter Sinclair plaque gleaming on the wall. We'd built something beautiful together, not just a business, but a life, a partnership, a love story that still made me dizzy when I thought about it. No regrets? Valerie asked as we swayed together during our first dance. None, I said, and meant it. Well, maybe one. What's that? I wish I'd met you sooner, I said. I wish I hadn't wasted so many years being afraid to be who I really am. Hey, she said, tilting my chin up to look at her. You weren't wasted years. They were preparation. You had to go through everything you went through to become the woman I fell in love with. She was right, of course. The failed marriage, the professional struggles, the years of feeling like I was living someone else's life, it had all led me here, to this moment, to her. Besides, she added with a grin, I like a challenge. And turning a straight, uptight lawyer into a happy, slightly less uptight lesbian, that's quite an accomplishment. I laughed, pulling her closer. I was never that uptight. Counselor, she said, her voice dropping to that familiar low register that never failed to make my pulse quicken. You wore business suits to bed for the first month we were together. They were comfortable. I protested, though I was laughing too hard to sound convincing. They were armor, she said more seriously, and I'm glad you don't need it anymore. She was right about that too. I didn't need armor anymore, didn't need to hide behind professional personas or other people's expectations. I'd found someone who loved me exactly as I was, brilliant and flawed, confident and uncertain, strong and vulnerable all at once. As the song ended, I looked around at the life we'd built together. The successful business, the beautiful home, the friends who'd become family. But mostly, I looked at her, this incredible woman who'd seen past my masks to the person I'd been hiding underneath. "You know what?" I said, kissing her softly. "I think I finally understand what it means to be truly happy." "Good," she said, spinning me around one more time. "Because this is just the beginning, Mrs. Carter Sinclair." Mrs. Carter Sinclair. I liked the sound of that. I liked everything about this new life, this new identity, this new version of myself that Valerie had helped me discover. Turns out, the best case I ever fought wasn't in a courtroom. It was for my own heart, my own happiness, my own right to love and be loved exactly as I am. And God, did I win? Sometimes the universe knows exactly who you need, even before you do. Sometimes it takes a Halloween party and a woman and a vampire costume to show you that the life you've been living isn't the only one available to you. Sometimes the scariest thing you can do is also the best thing you can do. And sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, the person who changes your world forever is standing right. They're waiting for you to be brave enough to let them in. I was lucky. I was brave. And I was finally, completely, gloriously myself.